Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Bava Metzia. We are up to Perek Vav Mishnah Bet. Today's Mishnayot should be Le'elu Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana, Aranbai, Eliyahu ben Burchai Israelov, Chana bat Miriam, Sason ben Ryan, Yoshua ben Shifra, Menuchatam began Eden, Amen, and Avdi ben Chaim Lechaim, with the Refuah Shelemav, Daniel Shalom ben Rosa, Betoch Shah Cholei Israel, and the Achlama Merav, Binamin, Od Zion Chai ben Dvoah. The previous Mishnah taught that if workers back out of a job and thereby cause the employer a loss, they may be penalized. Where backing out will not cause the employer a loss, though they may back out without penalty as long as they have not yet begun working. However, if they quit in the middle of a job, they are penalized, as the Mishnah now teaches. If someone hired craftsmen to do a job and they started the job but then changed their minds and refused to complete it, Yadan ala tachtona, the craftsmen have the lower hand with regard to their wages, meaning we calculate the wages for the work they completed in a way that favors the employer and not the workers. When workers do only part of a job, their wages can be calculated in one of two ways. One, they can be paid according to the percentage of the work that they did. For example, if they did half the job, they will receive half the amount they were promised. And two, they can be paid the full amount they were promised minus whatever it will cost the employer to have the job completed. If workers back out in the middle of a job, their wages are calculated by whichever method gives them less. To illustrate, workers were hired to do a job for 16 hours and they quit after doing half the job. The price of workers has gone up and such a job now costs 18 hours. Since half the job remains undone, the employer will have to pay 14 hours for workers to complete it. If the wages for the original workers are calculated by the first method, they will receive 3 dinars, half of the 6 dinars that they were promised. If their wages are calculated by the second method, they will receive only 2 dinars, the full amount of 6, minus the 4 that the employer will have to pay to hire new workers. Since they backed out in the middle of the job, their wages are calculated by the second method and they receive only 2 dinars. However, if the price of workers has gone down and the employer can now hire workers to complete the job for only 2 dinars, the reverse applies. If their wages are calculated the first way, they will receive 3 dinars. If their wages are calculated the second way, they will receive 4 dinars, the full amount of 6 minus the 2 that it will cost the employer to hire new workers. In this case, the wages are calculated the first way and they receive 3 dinars. If the price of workers has not changed and workers can be found to do the rest of the job for 3 dinars, both methods of calculation will produce the same result and the original workers receive 3 dinars. If, however, the employer changed his mind and fired the workers in the middle of the job, the employer has the lower hand, meaning the wages are calculated in a way that favors the workers and not the employer, meaning they're paid whichever is more, the wage for the percentage of the work that they did or the amount promised for the whole job, minus whatever it will cost to hire new workers. The Mishnah gives another case where a worker has the lower hand. Any craftsman who deviates from the instructions given to him. For example, he was given wool and told to dye it red, but instead he dyed it black. He has the lower hand when he collects payment for his work, meaning his pay is calculated in a way that favors the employer. Since the craftsman has improved the wool, the employer must pay him for his work. However, he has not paid what he was promised because he did not do the job he was hired to do. Instead, he can be repaid in one of 2 ways. One, he can be reimbursed for his expenses, for example, the equipment and dyes that he used. Or 2, he can be paid for the value of the improvement to the wool, meaning the difference between the value of undyed wool and that of black wool. He has the lower hand and therefore receives whichever amount is less. If the dyer ruined the wool instead of improving it, he must pay the employer its value. This is in Masechet Bava Kama, chapter 9, Mishnayot 3 and 4. Another case where a person has the lower hand, And anyone who goes back on his word during a sale has the lower hand, meaning if two people are involved in the sale of a piece of land and one of them backs out after part of the money is paid, the one who backed out has the lower hand with regard to working out the details. For example, someone offered to sell a field to his friend for 1,000 zuz. After the buyer paid 200 zuz, one of them decided not to go through with the sale. If it was a seller who backed out, the buyer has the upper hand and can choose whether he wants to receive back his money or receive the portion of the field that he paid for, in this case 1/5 of the field. If it was the buyer who backed out, the seller has the upper hand and can choose whether to give back the money or give the buyer a portion of the field. And that is an of Mishnah Bet. The next three Mishnayot discuss laws of renting animals. As a rule, a renter, a socher, is obligated to pay for damage that happens to the rented object because of his negligence and for damage that he could have prevented. He does not have to pay for damage that was unavoidable. This Mishnah, Mishnah Gimel, discusses whether a renter who does not keep to the terms of the rental is obligated to pay for damage that occurs. If someone rents a donkey and agrees that he will lead it only on a mountain, but instead he leads it in a valley, or he agrees to lead it in a valley but leads it on a mountain, he rented the donkey to carry goods to a place that can be reached by two paths, one that goes over a mountain, another that goes through a valley. The owner stipulated that the renter should take the donkey on a specific path, but the renter took the other path. Even if this path on the mountain is 10 mills long, a mil is a unit of distance, and that path in the valley is also 10 mills long, and therefore the renter did not take the donkey any farther than he agreed to take it. Vameta chayav. If the donkey dies on the way for no known reason, the renter is obligated to pay for it. This is because air on a mountain is different from air in a valley, and the owner can claim that the renter caused the donkey's death by bringing it to an environment that it was not used to. Air on a mountain is usually cool, while air in a valley is warm, since the mountains surrounding it prevent cool air from entering. Although the donkey seems to have died from natural causes for which the renter should not be liable, the owner can claim that its death was in fact the renter's fault because it was used to only one kind of air, either mountain or valley, and it died because the renter took it to an unfamiliar environment. The Mishnah discusses whether an owner is responsible to provide a renter with a replacement animal if the rented animal becomes unusable. Someone rents a donkey and it becomes blind, literally was lit up. The Mishnah uses this term as a euphemism for blindness. So if someone rents a donkey and it became blind, Oshana Aset Angaria, or it is temporarily seized for the king's service. It was common for officers of a king to seize an animal for their needs. They would use it until they found a different one, when they would return the first one and seize the second. If the renter demands a replacement, now since these events are definitely beyond the renter's control, it does not have to pay the owner for the injury or loss. If the renter demands a replacement, the owner can say to him, your animal is here before you, meaning the donkey that I gave you can still be used to some extent, therefore I do not have to replace it. A blind donkey can still carry things as long as the person leads it, and a donkey that was confiscated by the king's men will eventually be returned. Therefore, the renter will be able to use the donkey for the job he rented it for, as the Gemara says in the first opinion, on page 78b in Masechet Bava Metzia. However, if the donkey can no longer do the job it was rented for, the owner must provide a replacement. For example, if the renter hired the donkey to ride on it, the owner must offer a replacement if it becomes blind, because a blind donkey is not safe to ride. Now, the Mishnah's law applies only if the renter had specified that he wanted to rent this particular donkey. As long as this donkey can be used to some extent, the owner does not have to supply a replacement. However, if the renter had not asked for a specific donkey, the owner must provide an animal that is fully usable. If anything happens to the rented donkey, he must offer another one. Meta or nishbera. However, if the donkey died or broke a limb and cannot perform work at all, chayav la'amid lo chamor, the owner must provide the renter with another donkey for the rest of the term of the rental, or return the rental money. Now the Mishnah returns to the case where someone rented a donkey and took it on a path other than the one stipulated by the owner. Having earlier stated the law when the animal died from an unknown cause, the Mishnah now states the law when the animal died because of a specific reason. If someone rents a donkey and agrees to lead on a mountain, but instead leads it in a valley, the law is as follows. If the donkey slipped and died, the renter is exempt from paying for it. Although he did not obey the owner's instructions, its death cannot be considered the renter's fault, since if he had taken it on a mountain as agreed, it would have been even more likely to slip due to the mountain's steepness. Therefore, its death is considered an unavoidable accident, and the renter is exempt. Vimu chama chayav. However, if the animal was affected by the heat of the valley and died, the renter is obligated to pay for it. In this case, he is responsible for the animal's death. For if he had kept to the agreement and taken it on a mountain where the air is cooler, it would not have died from heat. In the next case, the reverse is true. Lo licha b'bikav o licha bahar. If a person rents a donkey and agrees to lead it in a valley, but instead leads it on a mountain, the law is as follows. If it slipped on the mountain and died, the renter is obligated to pay for it. For if he had kept to the agreement and taken it in a valley, it would have not slipped. But if it died because it was affected by the heat on a mountain, the renter is exempt. In this case, he is not responsible for its death, because if he had taken it to a valley as agreed, it would have been even more likely to die from heat. However, if the donkey became overheated and died because of the strain of climbing the mountain, meaning the animal was clearly straining and sweating during the climb, which shows that it died from the strain of the climb. In the previous case, the animal climbed the mountain with no visible effort and became overheated only later. In that case, it's clear that it died from the heat on the mountain and not from the strain of the climb. So again, if it died because of the strain of climbing the mountain, the renter is obligated to pay because he causes death by leading it up the mountain. And that is an Abotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.